When the last brick came loose, the room behind the wall was still breathing. You are listening to Ghost Stories by Rupert Harcourt. Subscribe, like, comment. Tonight, 3 original stories about the places a house keeps hidden, a shared wall that answers back, a new build void with a phone ringing inside it, and a cellar where the knocking learns your family's voices. The first story is called The Party Wall. Daniel moved into the terrace because it was cheap, and because the estate agent said the neighbors were quiet. The house sat halfway along a row of red brick homes that leaned into one another like tired men. Narrow hallway. 2 rooms downstairs, 2 rooms up. A yard at the back just big enough for a bin and a rusting chair. The left-hand neighbor was an empty property with boards over the windows. The right-hand neighbor was a retired woman called Mrs. Priest, who introduced herself with a tin of biscuits and a warning. "You'll hear it at first," she said. "Best thing is not to answer." Daniel assumed she meant pipes. That first week he heard all the ordinary noises old houses make. The boiler ticking, the stairs settling, rain in the gutter. At night he could hear Mrs. Priest's television through the wall, low and tinny, always some quiz show or old police drama. Then, on Thursday at 2001-6 in the morning, someone knocked from the empty house. 3 knocks. A pause. 2 knocks. A pause. 3 again. It came from the party wall in Daniel's bedroom, just above the skirting board, where the wallpaper had bubbled in a long, damp stripe. He sat up and listened. The boarded house next door had no electricity, no tenants, no furniture. Daniel had watched the councilman screw the front door shut 2 days earlier. The knocks came again. 3. 2. 3. Daniel put his ear to the wall. The plaster was cold. Behind it, something shifted very slightly, as if a person had leaned closer to listen. He did what most people would do when they are frightened, but still trying to feel sensible. He knocked back. Once. The wall answered instantly. Once. Daniel stepped away so quickly he hit the bed frame with his calf. The next morning, Mrs. Priest was sweeping leaves from her front step. When Daniel asked about the noise, she did not look surprised. She looked disappointed. "You answered it," she said. The story was old, she told him. Before the empty house was empty, a man named Carl Fenwick had lived there with his mother. Carl was strange, but not dangerous, people said. He spent his nights tapping on the walls. He claimed the houses were hollow, that someone moved inside the brickwork from one end of the terrace to the other. One winter he vanished. His mother said he had gone to Manchester. No one believed her. When she died years later, the council cleared the house and found every internal wall marked with pencil crosses. Hundreds of them. Some at shoulder height, some at floor level, some on ceilings. In the box room they found a note in Carl's handwriting. It said, "It knocks where the rooms are not." Daniel laughed because he needed Mrs. Priest to stop speaking. That night the knocking moved. It started in the bedroom, then traveled down the wall, slow as footsteps behind plaster. Daniel followed it to the landing. The taps continued, not beside him now but ahead, inside the stairwell wall. When he reached the kitchen, they were under the floor. 3, 2, 3. He turned every light on. At 3004, his phone rang. The caller ID said empty house. Daniel did not own a landline. He had no contact saved under that name. Still, the phone kept ringing in his hand while the wall knocked beside the fridge. He answered. At first there was only breathing, not human breathing, house breathing. Timber, plaster, dust, and something wet drawing air through a very narrow space. Then a man's voice whispered, "Wrong wall." The kitchen tiles began to bulge, not crack, bulge, each white tile pressed outward as if fingers were behind it, testing the grout. Daniel backed into the table. The kettle fell and split open, water spreading across the floor. The bulge moved left to right, searching. Mrs. Priest hammered on the front door. "Do not open the wall," she shouted. "Open the door." Daniel ran. When Mrs. Priest stepped inside, she was holding a claw hammer. She did not comfort him. She walked straight into the kitchen and struck the tiles, not where they bulged, but 6 feet away beside the back door. The plaster split. Behind it was brick. Behind the brick was blackness. And from the blackness came a soft, grateful knock. Mrs. Priest dropped the hammer. "Carl," she said. Something in the wall knocked once. She made Daniel leave the house that night. By morning, the kitchen wall was flat again. The council inspected and found no void, no damaged brick, and no reason for the tiles to have dried with fingerprints pressed outward from the inside. Daniel moved out before the month ended. The new tenant lasted 3 nights. Mrs. Priest saw him carrying boxes to his van at dawn. He had written numbers on both hands in black marker, the same pattern over and over. 3, 2, 3. Then he pointed at Daniel's old bedroom window and said, "It found the right wall." The second story is called The New Build Void. Amy was paid to find problems before buyers found them. She worked snagging inspections on new build estates, loose sockets, cracked tiles, windows that would not close, doors shaved so badly they looked drunk in their frames. Most houses had the same smell: fresh paint, damp plaster, and plastic still clinging to carpets. The house on Plot 47 was different. It smelled old, not old like dust, old like a closed church. Cold stone, wet coats, and something sweet gone rotten in a cupboard. The site manager said the buyers wanted it checked quickly. 4 bedrooms, detached, premium finish, last one in the phase. No one mentioned why 2 earlier sales had fallen through. Amy started upstairs. Bedroom 1, window handle loose. Ensuite extractor dead. Bedroom 2, radiator scratched. Bedroom 3, nothing. Bedroom 4, a hollow sound behind the wardrobe wall. She tapped it with her knuckle. The wall tapped back. Amy froze with her hand raised. New builds had voids. Boxing for pipes. Service spaces. Bad plasterboard. She told herself it was a loose panel shifting on a stud. Then a phone rang inside the wall. It was an old ringtone, thin and cheerful, the sort that belonged to a flip phone from the early 2000s. It rang 4 times, stopped, then rang again lower down, near the skirting board. Amy called the site manager. He arrived annoyed, hard hat under one arm, phone in the other. "There's no service void there," he said. "Then what's behind it?" "Insulation." The color drained out of his face. He told her to leave the room. Instead, Amy opened the wardrobe and found the back panel warm to the touch. Not hot. Warm, like another room on the other side had its heating on. The site manager tried to laugh. Probably someone's phone dropped during fit-out. But there was no access hatch, no gap, no builder's scrawl on the plaster. Just a clean white wall in a clean white house with a dead phone ringing inside it. At 5012, the buyers arrived early. They were a young couple with a little girl who carried a yellow backpack shaped like a duck. The girl stood in the hallway and looked up at the landing. "Is that bedroom mine?" she asked. No one had told her which room was which. The phone rang again. The girl smiled. "That's my old sound," she said. Her mother laughed nervously. Amy did not. The girl climbed the stairs before anyone could stop her. She went straight to bedroom 4, opened the empty wardrobe, and pressed her cheek to the back panel. "I can't come in," she whispered. Mummy said not again. The site manager grabbed her shoulder and pulled her away. The child screamed, not because he had hurt her, but because something inside the wall screamed at the same time. The plaster split from floor to ceiling, not wide, just a hairline crack, black as ink. From inside the crack came warm air and the smell of school dinners. Amy heard children talking, chairs scraping, a woman calling a register. Then the old ringtone again, deafening now, buried somewhere beyond the plaster. The little girl covered her ears. "It's the room we don't draw," she said. The buyers left. The site manager locked Plot 47 and said the sale was cancelled for structural reasons. Amy wrote no report, because no one would have paid it, and no one would have believed it. 2 weeks later, she returned after dark. She told herself she wanted proof. Really, she wanted the sound out of her head. The estate was quiet. Plot 47 stood with no sold sign and no lights. Amy slit through a rear patio door whose lock she had noticed was loose. Upstairs, bedroom 4 waited in the moonlight, clean and silent. The crack had been filled. She opened the wardrobe. Someone had drawn on the back panel from the inside. In crayon, reverse so it could be read from Amy's side, were 26 small stick children. 1 teacher. 1 door. No windows. No windows. Underneath, in a child's careful hand, it said, "We are still in the wall because the school moves without us." The phone rang inches from her face. Amy answered without touching anything. A boy whispered, "Tell them not to build the next one." Then every house on the new estate lit up at once. Every upstairs window, every hallway, every bedroom. And from behind the fresh plaster of Plot 47 came the sound of children knocking in a line, moving from wall to wall, house to house, as if they were counting all the rooms they had been given. The next morning, Amy looked up the land records. The estate had been built over a school demolished after a fire in 1983. All the children had escaped, according to the archived article. Only one sentence in the report bothered her. It said, "A temporary classroom remained unaccounted for until contractors confirmed it had never been installed." On the sales brochure, Plot 47's premium feature was listed as extra internal storage. The third story is called "The Knock Came from Inside." The Wall. Ruth came back to the cottage after her father died because someone had to clear it. She had not slept there since she was 12. Back then, she believed every old house had a bad room, and theirs was the cellar. Her father had called it childish. Her mother had never gone down there at all. The cottage sat at the edge of a village in the Pennines, low-roofed and damp, with walls thick enough to turn voices into murmurs. In the kitchen, behind a warped wooden door, stone steps led to the cellar. Ruth remembered the rule. If the cellar knocks, count to 10 before you move. Her father had pretended the rule was a joke. But as she sorted his papers, she found the same sentence written in his diary every winter for 40 years. Count to 10. That first evening, Ruth carried boxes to the car until rain forced her inside. She made tea. She sat at the kitchen table with her father's diary open to the last week of his life. Monday, 1 knock. Tuesday, 2 knocks. Wednesday, her voice. Ruth stared at the entry until the letters blurred. From behind the cellar door came one soft knock. She counted to 10. Nothing happened. At 11, the cellar knocked again. This time it was not a warning knock, it was polite. Patient. The kind of knock a neighbor gives when they know you are home. Ruth opened the door. The cellar smelled of wet stone and coal dust. Her torch beam found shelves, paint tins, a broken chair, and the far wall her father had always kept whitewashed. In the middle of that wall, about chest height, a brick stuck out half an inch farther than the rest. Knock. The sound came from behind it. Ruth should have closed the door. Instead, she went down. On the brick was a date, scratched in pencil. 1979. The year before Ruth was born. She touched it, and her mother's voice spoke from inside the wall. "Don't let him hear you counting." Ruth fell backwards onto the cellar steps. Her mother had been dead for 22 years, but the voice was exact, not remembered, not recorded. Exact, the tired breath before each sentence, the little break on the word counting. Upstairs, the kitchen door slammed. Ruth ran out of the cellar and found every drawer in the kitchen open. In the cutlery drawer, knives had been arranged in a neat row, all pointing toward the cellar door. Her father's diary lay open on the table. A new line had appeared beneath the last entry. Thursday, she came back. Ruth drove to the village pub and asked questions until people stopped pretending not to understand. An old man at the bar finally told her. Before Ruth's parents bought the cottage, a mason had lived there with his sister. The sister disappeared. The mason said she had gone to Leeds. But after that, he whitewashed the cellar every month. People heard knocking from the house and avoided it. When Ruth's father moved in, he found the cellar wall newly plastered and still wet. "Your dad knew something was behind it," the old man said. "Question is, why he kept feeding it." "Feeding it what?" The old man would not answer. Ruth returned after midnight because grief makes people brave in stupid ways. She took a crowbar from the shed. She opened the cellar door. She counted to 10. The wall waited. She put the crowbar under the raised brick. Her father's voice spoke from behind her. "Count slower." Ruth turned. No one stood on the steps. The brick slid free. Behind it was not earth, or a cavity, or the back of another wall. It was a room, a small room, upright behind the brickwork, no wider than a cupboard. Old wallpaper, a narrow chair, a tin cup on the floor. And at the far side, pressed into the dark, a woman with both palms flat against the inside of the wall. She was not skeleton. She was not corpse. She was simply too thin, and too pale, and too patient to have been alive in any way Ruth understood. Her mouth opened. Ruth counted without meaning to. 1. The woman's mouth shaped the number with her. 2. The room breathed. 3. Every wall in the cottage knocked at once. Ruth dropped the crowbar and ran. She did not stop until she was in the lane, barefoot in the rain, with cellar dust on her hands and her dead mother's voice calling from the kitchen window. "You moved too soon." By morning, the cellar wall was sealed again. The raised brick was flush. The date was gone. Ruth sold the cottage to a developer and never returned for the remaining boxes. 6 months later, she received the parcel with no return address. Inside was her father's diary. The final page had been filled in a hand that was not his. Friday, the wall is thinner now. Saturday, she remembers the daughter. Sunday, knock once if you are listening. Ruth burned the diary in the garden. That night, the bedroom wall knocked once. She counted to 10. At 10, nothing happened. At 11, her mother whispered from the plaster, "Good girl." And somewhere deep inside the house, a brick slid loose. If you have a story that should be kept for after dark, leave it in the comments. Subscribe for more ghost stories by Rupert Harcourt.